Thank you so much, Stephen Bernard. That's really what we're all about, those kinds of debates. We really believe in airing as many different views as possible. I think it's been a great conference. Steve, do you want to stick around for a few minutes? Hear my words of wisdom? Or split? Well, thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for coming to this conference. You're really the heart and soul of it, and we want you to participate as actively as possible over as many years as possible. Perhaps you know the story of the parrot in Soviet Russia that escapes from its cage and flies out the window. Its owner rushes out and hurries down to the Ministry of State Security. I just want to tell you, he tells the Soviet agents, in case the situation arises, that my parrot's views are not my own. None of us wants to live, ladies and gentlemen, in a society where we worry what our parrots might say, nor for that matter in a society where the presidential parrot would repeat, "I am a genius, America first, witch hunt, coup." China this week, as you may know, banned Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh, because of Winnie the Pooh's alleged resemblance to President Xi. Pooh, who memorably said, "People say nothing is impossible, but I do nothing every day," among other incendiary remarks. A society that bans Winnie the Pooh is a society with some serious issues. Ladies and gentlemen, we must safeguard free speech with great tenacity. For when it dies, as when truth dies, the worst becomes possible and probably inevitable. At the same time, as Magdalena Abramovich reminded us with the solemn force of her dignity, we must do better in the regulation of hate speech. But remember, freedom of expression also protects, and perhaps above all protects, the ideas we hate. That is the price of freedom, and freedom must be relearned every day. I will hear echoing in my mind for a long time Magdalena's appeal: education, education, education. When her husband Pavel was stabbed to death earlier this year in Gdansk, European city par excellence, the mayor's last word was solidarity with a small s, as Donald Tusk reminded us. This then was a frenzied attempt to take a knife to the human connection above and beyond barriers of class, race, religion that we affirm and reaffirm here at the Athens Democracy Forum. My sense from this gathering over the past 3 days, listening to you all, is that we know the ground has shifted beneath our feet. Digitalized democracy in the 21st century cannot be the democracy of the 20th century. At the same time, even as institutions must adapt and the connective tissue of our societies must be rewoven, and our economies on this vulnerable planet must become sustainable, we have a solemn obligation to defend the values that provided the framework of the 20th century's international order. By that I mean freedom, human rights and justice, democracy and self-determination, openness and the rule of law, free competition and economic opportunity, peace and security. I don't believe this undertaking can be advanced through nationalism and walls, myth-making and drum rolls, incitement and xenophobia, manipulation and mob mobilization. Been there, done that, suffered. The end point of nationalism, as François Mitterrand observed, is war. That's no less true today than it was at the Normandy landings, when, yes, the Kurds were unpardonably absent. Oh man, my president does take your breath away. Perhaps President Trump intends to resettle the Kurds in Greenland. We are here to listen, but also to do. Words without deeds fade into the mist. The doers admonished us here. Nathan Law, the Hong Kong activist who said, "We stand with the defenders of liberty everywhere. In Hong Kong, we're in the forefront of a clash of authoritarian and liberal values. If communism prevails, that will threaten all liberal democracies." I agree. Qasem Aid, survivor of Syria, in his mask, "If you don't fight for democracy, you don't deserve it." I bow my head. Paul Polman on the Great Recession of 2008, "Banks were too big to fail and people too small to matter." I've not heard a better summation. Ivan Krastev on the power of myth. "More Hungarians believe they've seen an unidentified flying object than believe they've met a refugee." Nothing is easier or more dangerous than generation of hatred of the stranger. I think we must be humble and we must listen to young people like our friend from South Africa who spoke earlier. As Kyriakos Mitsotakis put it, there's been a massive failure of elites to understand the new cleavages. Alvin Carpio moved me when he spoke of how, through social media, much criticized, we're hearing from people we've never heard from before. And by that, yes, democracy is reinforced. Complacency and contempt have been liberal democracy's worst enemies. The deplorable, to a significant degree, is in the eye of the beholder. It's not the prerogative of the globalized city dweller to ignore the concerns of all those living on what the French call the periphery and we call Middle America. Democracies have the merit of giving expression to discontent. This is what we've witnessed in the recent nationalist wave, a reaction by the invisible or marginalized to globalization's masters of the universe. And there I have to say, I agree with Steve Bannon. During the Vietnam War, the American ambassador to Saigon confronted the Agence France-Presse correspondent François Sully, whose coverage of the war had been extremely negative. And the ambassador said to François Sully, "Why, Monsieur Sully, do you always see the hole in the donut?" "Because, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur," Sully responded, "there is a hole in the donut." I call Western democracies holes in the donut the 6 I's: inequality, impunity, invisibility, immigration, inversion, and the internet. Inequality that we've heard a lot about today and how it's grown exponentially. Impunity that allowed the designers of the weapons of mass financial destruction of 2008 to walk away. Invisibility that gave many citizens living far from wired metropolises the impression that they counted for nothing. Immigration that in both Europe and the United States gave rise to unresolved tensions between the imperatives of the humane, and the law. Inversion of the values of what had been white, male-dominated societies, giving rise to culture wars ranging across the charged questions of race, gender, and identity, with cities and the hinterland at odds with each other. And the internet that has destroyed traditional mediators of society, like established political parties, and sometimes empowers the mob. It will not be easy to fill in the holes, but we must. Life, as Henry James observed, is a predicament that precedes death. Our struggles are not as new or as different as we imagine. The tension between freedom and equality is not new. The struggle between humanity and the machine is not new. The human susceptibility to folly is not new. Perhaps what is new above all is the means we now have, if only we would use them right, to build a connected world of dignity and decency. I lived enough of the American century to feel it in my bones. That movie, however, has ended. History is not an argument leading to a logical conclusion any more than human nature is composed of black and white. History is flux. In the mist, the spectres of nationalism, nativism, and xenophobia have stirred, now visible to everyone. And I think it's incumbent on us all to remember that the quest for homogeneous societies led to the greatest horrors of the 20th century. You know, the unimaginable can happen. We all watched in April as flames engulfed Notre Dame. Civilization is fragile. Democracy is fragile, like that toppled spire. On Yom Kippur, the Jews of Germany are attacked by neo-Nazis. It's impossible today, it's dangerous, to ignore the spread of the hateful. When a universal reference goes up in smoke, when a sanctuary burns, an abyss opens up. In conclusion, each of us, ladies and gentlemen, has a journey. I'm a Jew of South African descent, raised in Britain, shaped by France, an American now. These are the threads of my story, and we all have one, and they have left me, where they have left me is what I've tried to convey. They've put me here in Athens, where democracy began, as host of a conference I cherish. I am a bridge, not a wall person, and with the background I have, how could I be anything else? As a man of bridges, I'll end with the Pont Mirabeau and Guillaume Apollinaire, one of my favorite poets, wounded in the savagery of World War I, dead 2 years later of the flu at the age of 38. When I first lived in Paris in 1976, and that's when I began to write and become a journalist, I learned the poem by heart. Sous le pont Mirabeau coule la Seine, et nos amours, faut-il qu'ils m'en souviennent? La joie venait toujours après la peine. Under the pont Mirabeau, the Seine flows, and our loves, does the river have to remind me, in our loves, joy always came after pain. I remember standing on that bridge reciting those lines more than 4 decades ago. And this, from the same poem, Comme la vie est lente, et comme l'espérance est violente. How slow life is, and how violent hope. Comme la vie est lente, et comme l'espérance est violente. Some things, you know, just sound better in French. And some things, for the salvation of us all, must never be forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. We're on a great journey together, along with everybody in this room. We made a promise for this year. And the promise was dialogue, and what a finale we had, and we owe a lot of that to you, Roger, so thank you. I think we've delivered on the promise of dialogue.
I'd say so.
And I think this is the way we're going to get to new models for our changing world. Our promise moving forward as a foundation is one of aligning ourselves with more thinkers and especially more doers, as we said on day one. So we still urge you to come and see us, and we certainly take on board the comment on youth, something that we've been working on. So next year, that will be reflected in the forum. We heard a lot also about the Sustainable Development Goals coming from the United Nations. I strongly believe, and I have believed from the very beginning, that that's a way to achieve democracy. Paul Polman, as chair of International Chambers of Commerce, spoke eloquently and leads the way on Sustainable Development Goals. So this is how we're going to conclude our conference today. There's the 4 workshops, EBRD, inequality, and Microsoft is doing the Peace, Justice and Strong Institutions workshop. Mishkon Derega is doing climate action, and our students, GLAA, are doing education. Those 4 workshops are taking place in the Grand Britannia 1 minute ago. But before we leave, there's just a few thank yous in addition to the thank you to Roger. I'm going to start with Stephen Dunbar-Johnson. You should all know that this is happening this year because Stephen whispered in my ears 6 years ago that we should do it this way. If that's not leadership and vision, I don't know what is. So that's thank you to you, Stephen. We're on a good journey, and we've got a great team together. Louise Hunter has been with us for a long time and will be with us for much longer as we do great things on democracy and culture. Simeon Somokos and his team at Digoni Zorbath, wherever you are, Alina, the other at Digoni, the whole team at Simeon's, makes it happen here in Greece, and Alberto Cano has been making it happen for 20 plus years. All the people that are behind the scenes that we don't see, Yad, Dimitris, and Christina. I don't know if I have forgotten people. If I have forgotten people, I'm sorry. There's obviously my family, there's my partner. It all comes to life. It's all needed. But Serge Mayman, who I've left till last, along with all of you, because Serge is the link with all of you, is the content. It's the program. And it's Liz, and it's Alicia, and it's Steve, and it's Farah, it's all our journalists, led by Roger in this instance, that bring you to our effort to create new models for our changing world. So next year, I hope I'll see you all next year, bring another one person along with you, and we'll change the world. Thank you.